Zach with Wingard Wearables. You're one of 12 special people who's going to watch this video to the end. And today's video is about our first Blade Show experience. This video, we got back from Blade Show last Friday. It was like Blade Show turned into a family reunion thing. Just so much preparation went into it. The reason we're documenting it is we want you guys to know the work that went in for our first experience at Blade Show, how it went for us, what we learned, and if you're considering attending Blade Show or you're thinking of exhibiting sometime in the future, maybe you'll glean something from this video that will give you an edge at the world's largest knife show. Now, if you go back to when Wingard Wearables started in 2018, we've done tabletop shows before. And when you do a tabletop show, from my perspective, there are things that are directly measurable as a success of a tabletop show, like how many sales did you get off the show? And then there are things that are not directly measurable, but could actually have bigger impact. So people who weren't aware that your brand existed, they didn't buy anything when they saw it, but then later they became a lifetime customer, or some connection you made with another maker or potentially a dealer that established some sort of relationship. Or it could just be, not about sales at all, but just an exchange of information between other makers that helps you understand some material or design feature, or maybe a market trend that people are observing. So these shows, doesn't matter what the tabletop show is, you can't look at everything through that lens of what did you get directly measurable from tabletop shows. That said, our first few shows were pretty rough. So in 2018, I had a friend of mine who was in a outlaw motorcycle club, and he invited me because he knew I was starting a business with my wife. We had back ripper tomahawks then, and we had darter multi-tools, and he's like, hey, my club's having a get together and they're into these type of things. How about you come on out and see if you can, get folks interested in buying your product? And so I did 2 of those tabletop shows, and I sold 1 back ripper the entire time commitment of that. And that was a lot of driving and sitting at a table, and it was just really, it was rough. Then we did a gun show in York, PA in December 2018. And we had back rippers and darters out and didn't sell a single thing. And we were there the whole weekend, right? So that was also, And then in 2021, we did the Lehigh Valley Knife Show. And that was just coming off of COVID. And attendance was low. I don't know if they even had 500 or to 700 people go the whole 2 days. We definitely had sales. We did all right. I think we did enough just to cover the cost of the show. But at the same time, we had our online store open, and we were doing more business on the store than we were at the show. So those were our previous experiences at tabletop shows. And the whole time, people were telling us, you got to do Blade Show. It's the world's largest knife show. And the reason we didn't do Blade Show until this year, Blade Show, They claim 10,000 plus attendees, over 1,000 exhibitors. For us, Blade Show wasn't about elbowing our way in and getting a table and doing tabletop sales. Like our previous tabletop show experiences showed that that's not how we're going to feed ourselves, right? It's huge time commitment, and it's tough to do tabletop sales. But it's more about raising brand awareness, those intangible things that you can't measure directly. Networking, collaborations, getting information about the industry, and building relationships. That's what we saw Blade Show about. And the reason we didn't do it earlier is we just didn't have enough product in both breadth of design. At the time, we didn't have a knife. How could you go to Blade Show, debut your brand, and you don't have a knife, right? This year we did. We had the love handle. The other is we had production bottlenecks. We're small batch production. And in previous years, around the time that one would be ready for Blade, we were selling out of product online very quickly. And that's, supply and demand thing, but it's also a supply thing. If you're restricted on how many products you can make and offer for sale, you can wind up being sold out all the time. And finally, the year we committed 2024 to doing Blade, we made sure that we had inventory for both the storefront and inventory set aside for Blade. So in the months leading up to Blade, we had to take little bits of inventory and set it aside, especially to have at the Blade Show tabletop, just to not only display what we were doing for designs, but if people were interested in them, they could buy them, right? So yeah, Blade Show's good. We didn't go earlier, but we knew we had to. And so in 2024, we pulled it off. Now, it was really, really challenging. So you think about it, Blade Show they have a really big main exhibit hall, and when you do your first year at Blade, they usually don't put you in there. They usually put you in a smaller exhibit hall that they call the baller room. This room is still very large, but most of the foot traffic flows through that baller room, gets routed through it to the main exhibit hall, and oftentimes they don't go back to the baller room, as it's called. So it's like your first year. It's almost kind of like an initiation into the show. And so we knew we'd be in the smaller exhibit hall. There's still a ton of tables in there, and we needed to set ourselves apart and command attention, right? It's our first introduction of our brand to many of the people that will be attending Blade and many of the other makers that we want to build relationships with. So it was like, hey, how do we set ourselves apart, right? We're going to rent an 8-foot table. And so we started thinking through it. So the table is flat, right? It's got a flat top. What we decided to do was have a clear plastic cover on the table instead of a black tablecloth. And underneath that, this business started in 2008, but going back to 2016 is when I started doing like all these sketches and designs of what eventually became our products. So what we did is we went through all my folders of all of my hand sketches and CAD drawings and stuff. We printed them out for the CAD drawings and that sort of thing. And we made that the flat top decoration. So underneath the plastic cover, you could see sort of the story behind each of our designs, like the hand sketches and design evolution. So that way, when you walk by the Wingard Wearables table and you see these designs that are distinctive, they aren't just like standalone cool looking designs. You can see the story behind them and see all the thought process and design iterations that we had to go through. And it's visually interesting. So we decided to bet on doing that. And when we showed up at Blade, almost everyone there, wouldn't you say, had like the black tablecloth. Mm-hmm. And they had to, one of the advantages we discovered that I didn't think about on doing our display this way, it's very easy for dust and crumbs to fall on your tabletop, right? And whether you're doing setup or just, the 10,000 plus attendees that go to Blade, some of them are going to have like crumbs and stuff falling off of their hands. And so when you have a black tablecloth, it's very easy for these crumbs and bits of things to get on the table and like stand out, right? It easily looks messy when you have a clean, uniform color background. You get what I'm saying? I think you get what I'm saying. But because we had this collage of hand drawings, the table looked continually like a collage. Like you really had to look closely if like some speck of Kydex dust or crumb fell on the table. So that was kind of a unique benefit of doing that flat top. But people aren't going to see the flat top of your table from a distance. They have to be right on top of the table looking down at the products, right? They need to be routed to your table. Like they got to look through the room, this huge room, and see something that grabs their attention and gets them walking towards your table or slowing down as they walk past it. And so what we did is we were thinking about, well, how do we grab attention? My wife and I were brainstorming, and I was thinking, what if we had a giant tomahawk above the table? And when I said that, we agreed that would be amazing if it could be done. In my mind, I was doubting it could be done. And we had just so much going on in preparation for Blade Show. And I was really uncertain how we would get a huge tomahawk made Like, was it going to be a banner? Was it going to be like printed cloth and cut out in a shape? Was it going to truly be a three-dimensional scale up of one of our tomahawk designs? How on earth would you make it? How would you make it transportable from our house to Blade? Who was making it? That sort of thing. And my wife pretty much solved it all. We went through like design iterations on it and went to Lowe's, got like 2-inch thick polystyrene used in construction. It comes in a 4 by 8 foot board. We quartered it up in the store, took it home, and I had an Empress tomahawk. I traced, scaled up the dimensions, and my wife used, what'd you use, a hot wire cutter? Was that what it was?
Yep.
So she did rough cutouts of a Empress tomahawk in 3 pieces, the head section and 2 parts of the handle, so that when it would be assembled together, it would be 8 feet long and scaled up in correct dimensions, like completely proportional to a real Empress tomahawk. And so that was all cut out of 2-inch thick polystyrene. But it was like when it was cut, it was rough. And 2 inches thick is not, when you scale an Empress tomahawk up to 8 feet in size, that's too thin. So really it was a sandwich construction. It was 2-inch thick pieces. They had to be glued together. And the advantage of doing a sandwich construction is she could cut grooves on the interior of the pieces, and we could run 1/2-inch electrical conduit, essentially a metal pipe as a structural element running through the body of the handle section of our Empress tomahawk. And so, yeah, that's how it got pulled off. It was, gosh, what would you say, 20 to 30 hours of work? Mm-hmm. So it was like she had the hot wire cutter cutting out like to near net shape, and then was it hand sanding?
Yep.
So all that stuff with microplastics in the news, it was just clouds of microplastics, right? Like, and she had, what do you call it?
The ventilator and
yeah.
protection.
She had ventilator and eye protection and stuff on, but I mean, it was hot work out in the garage. She had to be masked up for it. She had a fan blowing to keep the microplastics like out of her face and stuff. But man, she did a ton of work. And then once she got it sanded, we then experimented. Well, she did with different paints. And did it have to be wound up hand painted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So spray paint didn't even work. But it was really high stress figuring out all the details of how to make this segmented 3-piece Empress tomahawk be assembled together and be transportable, because polystyrene, even construction grade, is inherently fragile, right? It cannot handle big loads. It easily fractures. So it was very nerve-wracking, when we were getting closer and closer to being finished, and then when we were transporting this thing, oh gosh. But it did work. The other thing that we had to devote energy on was graphic design. So on the vertical tabletop display, we wanted the prices clearly displayed so that people wouldn't have to ask us what the prices were. And if our prices were of something that wasn't a realm of someone's interest, they would easily be able to look and see, oh, this is like not how much I'm willing to spend, and they could walk on, right? So we wanted a clean visual way of displaying that. So I used a vector art program and made silhouettes of our products with text and pricing, and that was placed on these boxes that we lined the back of the table with. And the boxes served multiple purposes. We had a row of them. They had the prices on display. Behind them you could store things like product cards, so if someone bought something off the table, we could easily access cards and stickers and other things to hand them. I designed the graphics for a sticker. It was inspired by a Goliad flag, a historic flag where you had a severed arm holding a bloody saber. In this case, it was holding a bloody Empress tomahawk. So all that sort of graphic design work and almost like prop work, making the Empress tomahawk, that just took an enormous amount of both my wife and I's time. And really, we had the skills to pull it off in our business, but when I was at Blade Show talking with folks at the pit, there are like companies that do that sort of graphic design work for other knife makers. They actually charge a lot. Now, their work is going to look more polished, but I mean, it was like, for the amount of graphic design that we did, we would have had to pay someone easily $1,500 or more just to do a series of graphic designs in support of our tabletop display. And I would estimate it would be easily a couple of $1,000s if we had paid someone to make a giant Empress tomahawk. So it was an enormous amount of time and effort, but it was worth it, right? And so we definitely had a tabletop display that stood out and was unique. Now, there are other things involved in Blade Show. Blade Show is in Atlanta. We are in Landenberg, PA, and we now have a substantial amount of product to transport down. And we have a car that is old. Well, it's getting old. 2014 Subaru Forester. It has crapped the bed on us before. We've had to replace the transmission in it. The AC was getting bad. You don't want to be driving around in Atlanta in bad AC. So there was just various car things that had to be done, juicing up the AC and getting it inspected. We crossed over 220,000 miles in that car on this trip, and it did fortunately hold together. It didn't break down on us or anything, so we were just really glad that happened. Also, on tabletop sales, although that wasn't the primary goal of the show, of course you want to sell as much as you can, but how much product do you set aside for Blade Show to bring down? Right? We had to set aside little chunks of products from each small batch we made of, say, back rippers or quills or dick picks, that sort of thing. We had set aside a few starting in January of this year that were set aside for Blade. But how much should we bring? I mean, we had no idea. So we just took a guess, said, hey, we need to bring at least 10 of each product line with us for tabletop sales. So all that had to be stored securely in transport and overnight at Blade Show. We purchased these two big Pelican cases. They were about 2 feet wide by almost 3 feet long, about 2 feet high, very large. And we basically had all our products distributed in those two Pelican cases. My wife even mapped them out so you could store these under our table at Blade and kind of have an idea when you open the Pelican case to reach in where the products were that you were accessing. So, I mean, it was just all this level of detail. You can tell we're two type A personalities, right? That's a key to success, all right? Now, at the same time, before January, I was talking about setting aside small batches of production. We wanted Blade Show to be extra special. So what we did, starting in September of 2023, I wanted to have Damascus quills out on the table at Blade Show to sort of show the breadth of our design and where you could visually apply it, because the quill is a very clean, simple, curved spike, and I really thought Damascus would pop on that. So starting in September, I networked with a local blacksmith that I hadn't worked with before, who had skill at making Damascus. He made Damascus knives sort of as a hobby, and he was monetizing the hobby. And I met with him, was like, hey, would you be interested in working with us to make Damascus billets that could be forged into quills? And it took a while, but it was done. And let me see if I can get this shown here. All right, my wife may have to tell me to move my hand
A little closer if you can.
a little closer,
Down a hair.
down a hair. All right, so that's the quill Damascus. And this is 1080 and 15N20. So the kind of the classic Damascus steel. And we had twist pattern and also sort of a flat layout pattern. Now, those got made. I think we brought, 6? We were able to get 6 out of the 2 billets of Damascus that he was able to forge for us. And we also, our blacksmith that makes our quills, made them out of the billets this other blacksmith made. So it was actually a collaboration between 2 blacksmiths that lived in our small town area. So that was pretty cool. And we wanted to bring back the micro pike multi-tool. And so the micro pikes, we launched micro pikes in 2019, and it was like a small batch, and we changed how we designed that. We tweaked the designs on how we made them for this batch. They're sharper and stronger and tougher, and the leather wrap is improved and everything. It's better in every way, and we were able to get 9 of them made to debut at Blade Show. So this is sort of what we consider MicroPike Gen 2. And that was something that was also months in the works. So, long story short, preparation for Blade Show took up an enormous amount of effort. Like, it was months and months and months of lead time, like moving towards these things. But then about 2 months before Blade, it pretty much, all the Blade Show efforts eclipsed all our design work. We pretty much had to put all our new product development and refinements to current product lines that we were trying to push on. We had to just put it on the back burner and focus on a successful Blade Show debut. Now, Wednesday before Blade Show, we began our travels from Landenberg, PA. We left around 10:30 in the morning, drove all the way down to Archdale, North Carolina. Now, we love North Carolina as a state. Leah and I had never been to Archdale before. We were pretty hungry when we got into town. If you're in Archdale, or you go by there, Blue Rock Pizza and Tap. We went there for dinner. The pizza was delicious. They had a really good beer as well. What was it, like a Hefeweizen with, what was the fruit they had in it? Tangerine Hefeweizen. Before these hazy IPA thing took over, like in the early 2000s, like you would occasionally have microbreweries that would come out with Hefeweizens. I remember I would splash a little OJ in my Hefeweizen, and it was just like perfect. You could drink that all day long. And that beer they had reminded me of that, so that was pretty cool. Then we stayed in a 2-star hotel in Archdale. Wouldn't recommend that. But Thursday we got up to travel from Archdale to the Cobb Galleria Center for Blade Show setup. We woke up in the morning and we went to Biscuitville. We had never heard of this chain before. Biscuitville, they apparently have many locations. I do not derive any payment from Biscuitville. This is not a Biscuitville advertisement, but they made some really good biscuits. And they had like, they claimed made from scratch, like a new batch of biscuits every 15 minutes or something. And it looked like it because you walked in and there was like this plexiglass shield. And they always had a worker there like mixing the biscuits, So it was Archdale had like multiple Biscuitvilles there. So it was like the capital of Biscuitville was where we were staying at. So definitely check it out if you're in that area of North Carolina. I had never even heard of this chain. It's apparently been in business since like the 60s or something, but it was very good. Now, we made it to the Cobb Galleria Center around 1:30 in the afternoon, and we were able to get checked in and set up in the baller room from about 1:30. It took us, a couple hours to get set up. High stress unpacking the polystyrene 3-piece construction giant Empress Tomahawk and going up, walking from the car with it, going up the escalator, and then assembling it. It was on this, pardon the burp there. It was on a adjustable banner, like heavy duty banner that's used for like photography, like wedding photography, where they have banner holders and things like that. So we had brought that, set it up behind the table, and we successfully assembled and erected this 8-foot Empress Tomahawk. And it was 8 to 10 feet up in the air, more than that. I mean, it stood out in the room. So we did complete table setup, the flat top display, the vertical display. We stored our Pelican cases under the table, all locked up, but good peace of mind knowing our product was under the table, but completely secured. And around 4 p.m., I think we were done, and we decided to walk around. I walked into the main exhibit hall, and you could sense the panic in the air, because people were showing up. I think they had a cutoff time of 7 p.m. was when they closed everything. So people who suffered travel delays, either flying in to Atlanta or driving, they were getting in there at 4 p.m. having to set up not just tables, but some had booths that were multiple booths in size. And they had the big bay doors open in this huge room, and it's Atlanta heat, and the AC couldn't keep up. And the Cobb Galleria Center people were even still rolling out and installing strips of carpet while all this setup was happening. It was just chaos. It was hot and sweaty, and you could sense that panic. So we were really glad we got set up early. But if we do Blade Show next year, which we plan to, and we're in that main exhibit hall, I'm thinking it makes sense to show up a little bit earlier, because if we had showed up at 1:30, it probably would have still been pretty hot and a little bit less panicky, but still, it was like some negative energy vibes from that. You could sense the panic. Now, end of the day, we had eaten all this heavy food, right? I told you about that pizza place, Biscuitville. We were stopping at like every Chick-fil-A for like lunch or breakfast otherwise. So we had all this heavy stuff in our guts. And it was like, all right, we got done with setup. We want to eat something light, air quotes. So we went to the Great Greek Mediterranean Grill, and it was pretty good. There was one thing they made that was kind of meh. It was the dessert. The baklava was too dry. It was like as dry as a cracker. But other than that, it was good. Right? I'm giving you guys all this intel. When you go down to Blade Show, you're gonna know restaurants to hit up and everything. So yeah, that was the end of Thursday, the setup day. We got into a hotel. The hotel was much nicer than the 2-star joint we were in Archdale. And we were just like wondering what would happen on the first day. And the first day, Friday, I think they opened the show, at 10 a.m. for early bird. Like people had purchased advance tickets. And then they opened to the general public around 11. So it was like Friday was a day where the show opened at the latest time and it closed at 6. So it was like a gradual ramp up in intensity. But we had a lot of sales on Friday, so that was very good. And at the end of the day, they have an event called The Pit at a hotel lobby. It's like after the show, exhibitors and anyone from the public can gather there. And it's renowned for like a networking event. And I showed up way too early. Like it was kind of dead when I showed up. I think I showed up around 7:30 or something. And I left a couple hours later. I talked to a few people, but I was just exhausted from, my body. I'm an early to bed, early to rise type guy. I had not calibrated my internal clock for these like late into the night, pit sessions. And my voice was like almost shot. So I was not very much into doing the pit thing on Friday. Now, Saturday, the second day, I had lost my voice the night before. I had purchased one of these like voice box steamer things where like vaporizes water and tries to like lubricate your vocal cords. So I tried that in the morning and some vocal exercises, but I sounded pretty horrible. It was the earliest start of the day. I think it started at 9 and it went to 6, so it was the longest day. Saturday, it was apparently known as the long day and the busiest day at Blade. But we had less sales than Friday. And when I went to the pit, I went later because I figured the crowd would be bigger then, and it was. And I was at the pit for a few hours and turned in before midnight. But when I was talking to folks at the pit, some of the folks had exhibited at Blade Show for years, and they said this was the first slow Saturday they had ever experienced. So we saw a drop off on sales on Saturday, and so did others, which was apparently unusual for Blade, very unusual. So Sunday, the last day of the show, I had lost my voice again the night before. I sounded and looked extra horrible. I just went out on like the balcony of our room to do my vocal exercises because my voice sounded so horrible. I didn't want my wife to hear it. And I did the voice steamer thing, and somehow I got enough of my voice back that I could perform, talking to these people like in the public. Even though Sunday was a slow day, this is like accumulated days of vocal cord damage. So it was kind of rough. But we had less sales, on Saturday than Friday, and on Sunday is traditionally the slow day, so we had even less sales then. We packed up. We did hear from other exhibitors that this Blade Show overall was slow. And yeah, that's how it went. Overall, 2 months of planning and effort that went into it. Um, it eclipsed a lot of our research and development of new products and product development that we were planning. Um, we think it was worth it. The direct measurable parts of a tabletop show, like the sales, they were on the lower end of expectations, but it sounded like it was that way for a whole bunch of other people at Blade. Um, but that wasn't the point of Blade. Like, we would estimate maybe 3/4 of the attendees that went by our table had never heard of our brand before, so it really helped raise brand awareness. Also, just walking around Blade before it would open, like, you could walk through and see the tables of other exhibitors. No one had a table like we did. Many people told us that, so we did successfully showcase the uniqueness of our products and our brand with that unique tabletop design. The Big Tomahawk was a big hit. There were people that walked into the baller room that were looking for Wingard wearables, and they could just look around and boom, there it is, the Empress Tomahawk. They walked to it. I suspect that people that were attracted to Tomahawks slowed down when they came to the table, and people who had no interest in Tomahawks didn't come by, right? And that's okay. But yeah, Big Tomahawk was a big hit, and it survived the trip, right? So that was very good. So one of the things that's like a good and bad thing about our range of products, our products are so unique in design and form and function, that sets us apart. And I don't think there was a single table out there that had such a range of products, from small spike tools to, unique thrust-based weapons, the love handle, our tomahawks. It was just such a broad range. And that's good, but it required me talking through and showing the features to people that were interested to see them. So I talked a lot. I was drawing weapons from concealment, like I had Sparrowhawk under my arm, back ripper in my pants. I had the love handle across my belt, quill behind the ear, micro dick pic in my pocket, and I was drawing all of them. What would you say, hundreds of times a day? And I was talking to hundreds of people a day. Because you had to explain these designs that were so interesting that people wanted to know what it was, especially the quill. No one had seen anything like that. So at the end of every day, I lost my voice, right? And having designs that are less obvious in what they can do, it is going to be harder for someone to see that and instantly be like, I gotta have that, right? They gotta think about it. It's the first time they're introduced by such a radical idea. So I think a lot of what happened at Blade, we're going to see harder to measure payoffs later from people that saw us and then bought later. We're already actually seeing some of that when we reopen the store. That was the other thing. If we were to do Blade again, which we are planning to, we had to close the store online while we were doing it because we were gone for so long. We could not feasibly ship products. We couldn't bring our methods of packaging products with us in the car. And also, it was difficult to manage our online inventory versus the tabletop inventory. So if we were to do Blade again, we would like to figure out how to keep our online store open while we're at the table, because it was like the week before Father's Day. So yeah, that's something that we learned as well from Blade. Also talking with folks that were in the know in the industry. That's one of the advantages of going to these shows, is being able to have FaceTime with folks like that who can give their perspective. They are seeing sales slow down across the Blade industry this year, down all year, and also at other tabletop shows. And, Leah and I think it's probably a cumulative effect from years of record inflation. There may be other things going on, but we might be heading into some lean years as makers of knives and cutting edge weapons and that sort of thing. It looks like it could be a tough one. We had a good show. This was definitely our best tabletop show we've ever done. And so we want to do it again. And next year we're hoping to not be in the baller room. We're hoping to get in the main exhibit hall just to try it out, because we did piece together that not only was the flow of human traffic different in the smaller room versus the exhibit hall, but it appeared that a number of people only went to the exhibit hall. Like they didn't go to the baller room. So hopefully next year we can get in there. Now, we also saw very interesting people. So Chris Byron from Volpe's Training, he's been making our trainers, our tomahawk trainers, for years. We finally got to meet him face to face. With him was Josh Wagner and Erroneous, well, stumble over this, Erroneous Blades. So those are two makers who came to assist him with his booth. He had a big booth next to Doug Marcada. So it was great to finally meet them. And there were folks who are just killing it on social media, like Bob from the Knife Junkie podcast. I've been on his podcast multiple times. I've never met him in person, so it was great to finally meet him. Levon from the Knife Nuts podcast. I've never been on that podcast, but he is taking over management of the Lehigh Valley Knife Show, and we may do that show in the near future, so it was good to talk to him and get perspectives. And there were a few other people that stopped by briefly, like Alex Garland. He's got a big YouTube channel focused on knife sharpening and other knife performance. Ed Calderon, huge Instagram presence, and big impact into everyday carry knife designs. And then there were like prolific YouTube content folks from O'Neill Outdoors, Have a Knife Day, Said Stevie and Snuzz Nuzz came by as well. I'm sure I'm forgetting some others because it was just a whirlwind of a weekend. Also, knife designers and makers came by. Like before the show opened on Saturday, Andrew Dimko came by. He owns an Empress Tomahawk. He's an avid tomahawk collector, so it was great to finally meet him. Joe Flowers, he designs knives for Condor Knife and Tool. Tobin from Stonehaven Knife Works came by, and I think he got a quill as well, which was nice. It was very nice of him. And Michael Jarvis came up to me in the pit. So he's with, he's the face of auxiliary manufacturing, and really I thought he was probably the most positive person I've met at the show, like as far as just overflowing with optimistic energy. So it was really nice of him to come up and talk to me. I really appreciate that. Now, when I started first paying attention to everyday carry knives and got really into it in like early 2000s, Fred Perrin, man, his designs caught my attention. It was just amazing. A couple of years ago, my designs caught his attention. He wound up mailing, he asked for my address and mailed a couple of things to me as a gift. It was, he had modified a number 8 open L knife to be flippable and reduced in weight, and I actually carry that very frequently in my EDC rotation. And he gave me a piece of antler that he modified into something that looked a lot like the quill as an impact weapon, and also he gave me a mid-tech ring talon type knife design of his, and that was very nice of him to do. That was like 2 years ago, and he came by the table twice actually, and we gave him, it was great to talk to him, great to meet him and hear some interesting perspectives from him, but we did give him in return a quill. He picked out a black slim quill, so it was great to kind of have that sort of gift exchange, and finally, to meet this guy that I've been, just amazed by his breadth of designs and experiences. I mean, I've been following that guy's work for over 20 years, so it was great to have him come by the table twice and actually be complimentary of our designs. That's just like a huge honor to me. Now, speaking of characters, the biggest surprise, Lynn Thompson from Cold Steel Knives came to the table. He didn't even look at the table or our products. He looked me in the eye, stuck out his hand, I shook his hand, and there's temperature in blade. His hands were sweaty, right? I may have caught something from him, okay? I'm like feeling the urge to wear shorts and swing a sword at a pig carcass, I don't know. But anyway, he came up, didn't look at the table, didn't look at any of our products, and he said that he watched all our YouTube videos and was basically irritated by them. So his words were, I'm quoting this, he said something like, I watch all your YouTube videos, and to be frank, I was a little bit butthurt. And apparently, Lynn believes his products are perfect, right? And so I have probably our most popular video on YouTube. I'm kind of amazed that he watches our low quality YouTube videos, but we had our most popular video is about modifications you can do to cold steel tomahawks because they're too heavy compared to historic examples. And he disagreed on that hard. So we had a gentlemanly disagreement where both party thought the other was just dead wrong, but neither would change their minds. And he may put out a video to rebut our videos. But the gist of it is his tomahawks are heavy, and he believes you need that weight because he's like slamming them into the skulls of like Cape buffaloes and all these other animals that have way higher skull thickness than your noggin, right? But I stood my ground because, my mentor Jack Vargo, he's like made accurate reproductions based on archaeological finds of historic spike tomahawks. And I mean, I've surveyed just every bit of information I can, and yeah, tomahawks are way lighter than that. But anyway, he may come out with a video. I was flattered that he watched our videos because our videos the quality is slowly improving, but they're pretty bad, especially back then. The cats were leaping into the frames and knocking stuff around. It was awful. Anyway. That was an interesting experience. Lynn Thompson, very interesting, very high energy. So on Sunday, before the show opened, me and my wife walked through the main exhibit hall, and we also met Helm, Mr. and Mrs. Helm from Helm Forge. Very helpful people, very good interaction. And I also saw a couple of celebrities I was too shy to talk to. So Doug Marcada, and then George Spray from like the Slingshot channel. And then we saw a celebrity we didn't recognize. This person came up and bought a back ripper and came back the next day to get tips on carrying it. And then he took my picture. Was it the second day or first day? I don't remember. I don't even remember him taking a picture, but he did. It turned out he was the lead singer, Randy Blythe, of Lamb of God. It's not a gospel group, Lamb of God. It's, just so you know, if you didn't know, it's a heavy metal band. But it was very nice of him to buy a back ripper. I hope it serves him a lifetime. But that was actually, I guess, the only, I'd call it real celebrity. I guess Doug Marcado is a celebrity. He was on a Discovery Channel show. But, don't they have Naked and Afraid on Discovery Channel? Do they still do that show? Anyone can get on TV if they just strip down and get naked and miserable. People love watching misery and nakedness on TV. Ugh. Anyway. Now, Sunday, we were exhausted. We traveled. We packed up, successfully stowed everything in the car. It was really hot. And we drove to Alabama. We stopped by to Jim and Nick's Barbecue. That's a well-known chain, but it's delicious. We got charged up with some energy there. And then from Sunday through Thursday, we were visiting family in Alabama. I probably wouldn't do tacking on it. We're definitely not going to do a family reunion tacked on the blade again. It was terrible for my family. It was terrible for us because we just had no energy left. It was like you talk to hundreds of people a day. My wife and I are introverts. I think an extrovert would be exhausted from that experience. So it was just too much. But, it's always great to see family, even when you're like just completely tapped out and can barely talk. But yeah, we traveled back Thursday night, made it to Chattanooga, and then made it the rest of the way on Friday back to PA. We're in recovery mode. I am very low energy. You can probably see it and hear it in my voice. This is the first day my voice has sounded normal since Blade, and we are, what day is it? The 19th? So it took 10 days for my voice to recover. So I'm hopeful next time around I can do more voice exercises. I do think the vocal cord steamer device did help. But we do plan to do Blade Show next year. Hopefully we can get in the main exhibit hall and see how that goes. And we definitely did not sell out of everything at Blade Show. So we will be putting up products on the site. I haven't made full decision on how much we're going to put on the site this week versus next week. But for sure, we're going to have 6 back rippers, maybe 7, up on the site. And then we have, I think, 7 micro pikes, multi-tool Gen 2s. And, of course, our Damascus quills. We have very few of those. But we are going to put those up on the site either now or some of them now. And, we got to like photograph these up close and do good product spec descriptions and stuff on the site. And I'm so tapped out on energy, I don't even know if I can get the willpower to do that, but we'll see. Anyway, you are one of the 12 special people to watch this video to the end. I hope you have a fantastic June. Share it with a friend so that 13 will have watched it. And remember to be edgy.